taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Buick Envista. In this walkthrough, you're going to learn everything you need to know about the steering wheel. The first thing I'm going to point out is that it's a manual telescoping wheel. So by your left knee, there's a release there. You can go in, out, up, and down to find that perfect position. Once you do, click it in order to lock it back into place. The buttons on the left-hand side are going to be for your adaptive cruise control system. So you can toggle the system on or off by pushing the button there. You can then either cancel or switch out to traditional cruise instead. So the adaptive cruise is the set it and forget it cruise. So let's say if you set it at 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, if the car in front of you slows down, yours is automatically going to brake. Versus switching it to the regular cruise control instead, if you set it at 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, car in front of you slows down, yours won't brake, so you've got to brake yourself. I personally am a bigger fan of the adaptive cruise control system though. Then you've also got the gap adjustment, and I want you to think of that like a 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi type of a rule. So how close or far away do you want to be from the vehicle that's in front of you? I personally recommend on the highway 2 to 3. On regular city streets, 1 is more than enough. But if you want to walk through and how that actually works in person, you'll find that down in the description of this video. There's also a button for a heated steering wheel, which is available inside of the Envista, and it's heated pretty much all the way around, which is fantastic. There's a voice command prompt there. So when you're hooked up to your phone through Android or iPhone devices, you can push there in order to activate your Google or your Siri Assistant instead. Then there's this button there, and that one is going to be to hang up on a phone call. You can answer a phone call, and then you can also adjust your media that way instead. And then there's also a little rocker there to go between some different screens that I'll show you in just a second. But another thing to point out, your stick on the left-hand side, so you can flash out your high beams that way if you want to. There's an auto lamp mode as well. But for the high beams, if you wanted to permanently lock those out, you have to be out of the auto mode. So there's a button just by your left knee. So you have to get yourself into one of the other modes instead, and then you can push away in order to be able to activate your high beams permanently instead. I personally am a bigger fan of the auto mode though, but that one's going to be a matter of personal preference. And then the stick on this side is going to be able to adjust what's going on with your wipers. So moving up and down this way, if you're in the auto mode, that's going to be how quick or how slowly do you want the wipers to be going versus high versus low automatically. You're going to pull in towards you to get that front windshield wiper fluid going as well. And then the Envista does not have a rear wiper whatsoever. Now, the cluster screen, let's zoom in a little bit there. There are quite a few different things you need to know. So first thing is that you'll notice I need to put in a little bit more windshield wiper fluid. But if you ever get a message there, you can just push the little scroll wheel in, and that acts as an OK button. So I've gotten rid of that warning message. Now, you can see there, I currently don't have my seatbelt plugged in, which is why that message is turned on. You can see what direction you're currently facing, whether or not your lane keeping system is active or not. So you can toggle that one on or off down the center stack. With it turned on, when it recognizes the lane markings, it's going to go green. And then if you start to veer over into another lane without signaling, it's going to gently nudge you back into your lane. It's not a full lane centering system, but at least it's nice that it's going to keep you nice and balanced as you go. From there, you've also got your current fuel gauge, how many kilometers or miles you are to empty, your current vehicle speed, what gear you're in, so whether that's park, reverse, neutral, drive, or if you're in your dedicated low gear, and what gear are you in when that's the case. You can see your current odometer, your engine temperature, and then also your lead vehicle. So how far away are you from the vehicle that's in front of you? So again, that is going to work regardless of whether you've got the adaptive cruise control system turned on. So you can see if you're half a second, 3 seconds, whatever the case may be, in front of the lead vehicle, which I think is useful. From there, you've also got the flexibility to be able to customize the screen a tiny little bit. So if you push and hold for a brief second, that's going to pull up the gauge faces. And there are a few different ones that are available. So you've got gauge face 1 that has a little tachometer as well as your digital speed. Pushing and holding again for a brief second will bring you into a few other options. You can go basic vehicle information instead. So if you wanted fuel economy, that would show up. Pushing and holding again is going to give you the option for infotainment or just like a clean, minimalistic look instead. So there are some different options that are available. Personally, I'm a fan of either gauge 1 or gauge 2. Gauge 2 is nice because you've also got your traditional tachometer as well as the digital speed, but there's no dual setup where you can have the tachometer and the speedometer. So it's just this setup if you wanted to be able to see them both. So that one's going to be a matter of personal preference, but I personally am a fan of this one. And then there are also some other options that are available inside of the infotainment system too. So you've got your traction control. Hold on, let's see if I can move you over there. There we go. So you've got your traction control button there. So you can turn traction control on versus off. You can have traction control off with electronic stability control on or off. A benefit to some of these systems is that it's going to play with your traction and stability control. So big benefit there is that you're going to be able to increase traction in sand, mud, snow, or icy conditions. So if you're in Canada, having your traction control system turned off can definitely be useful. And then on or off during different circumstances. So again, it's going to help you out with wheel spin. From there's this other button, and this one is the useful one. So you've got different maintenance options. So you can see your tire pressure and oil life, and then switching across to your engine air filter as well. So if you're changing oil yourself, you can reset, or you can also show this right inside of the cluster screen instead. So it kind of gives you a little bit more of a unique look. You can also do that for some of your gauges. So if you wanted your battery voltage, or if you wanted your coolant temperature showing, either in the infotainment system or in your cluster screen, you can adjust it that way instead. And then you can see your coolant information right inside of the cluster. And that's the same thing with your trip counter. So the trip counters aren't accessed directly through the screen. It's done through the infotainment system. But you can click here in order to be able to reset all of your different counters. So reset trip 1 versus 2, and then you can also show it inside of the cluster screen. So if we show inside a cluster, you can see there it's now showing. So you've got your digital speed along with that basic information. You can also do a reset. So if you needed to reset your trip 1 or your trip 2 counter, you've got the flexibility to do it. And then there's also fuel economy. But the fuel economy inside of the Envista is great. And you can see there for this fuel economy rating, it was 80 kilometers that I drove with 6.1 liters per 100 being the best fuel economy that I was getting. So the fuel economy inside of this vehicle is really, really good at the same time. You can change the distance, you can reset your score, or you can also show that information inside of the cluster screen as well. And those are going to be the basics, but like if you want a full walkthrough on the infotainment system, you'll find that down in the description of this video. But I like the basic setup there. And then if you're not a fan of having that kind of information look instead, again, you're just going to press and hold that button on the steering wheel and then switch between any of the other options. So whether you wanted the infotainment showing or just your basic clean setup instead, which I mean, even still, that clean setup, I think that does look pretty nice. So I know that's a little bit of information, but that's everything that you need to know about the steering wheel buttons as well as the cluster screen inside of the Buick Envista.